Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lip Service, a podcast of our coming out stories. I am your host, Pam Myers, and I am here today with Rope Wolf. Rope is coming to us from beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thanks for coming on to the podcast, Rope.
Thank you.
So we're here to hear your coming out story. Where would you like to begin?
It's. I think I'm one of those people that always knew, so it's a little different for me. When I was a little kid, I knew that I was different and I looked different, and I was always, trying on my boy cousins' clothes
Mhm.
because they had little boy suits and the butcher clothes, and when you look like me, you kind of know you're different. Not to say that I didn't date boys and go through all that with, but it's sort of a different vibe. I went to all girls school.
Mm.
So the boys were separate and they would come and join us. So it was like, oh, this is what we're doing now. Okay. I even went to women's college. So,
Mhm. Where did you so when you said when you were young, like give us some context
oh,
about.
like 6 years old, I knew I was different. And
Yeah.
my Native American grandmother took me aside when I was about 12 or 13, and she said, you know, some people might think you're different, but there's people like you in among our people, meaning our native people.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, right, Grandma. Okay. It's like, uh-huh. You're not filling it in completely with what is she trying to say, but she was trying to also tell me, and it's okay, and you're okay,
Mhm.
and also warning me about Catholic school. Like, they might say things that don't make sense to you, but you're going to get a great education. And
Wow.
I had already figured that out by 13. Like, okay, some of this does not ring very true for me, but
Mhm.
you know, I could see what my neighborhood friends were going through with schooling, so it made sense to have
Wh-
that conversation.
Where did you grow up? What area of
So
the
I grew up
country?
in San Francisco, which is gay mecca, but I didn't really, connect that. And I really came out. It probably was 19. Here, now I feel ancient. 1974.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
left for college,
Mhm.
and so the uh, gay pride parades and things like that were yet to come almost, and Stonewall, etc. But there was already the rumblings, and I knew gay people growing up. It just wasn't a thing. They were just in our family friends. My mother's friends, most of them were, um, gay people,
Mhm.
and it just didn't occur to me. You know,
Yeah.
and I bumped into magazines, and the first time somebody called me, uh, ironically a fag, I was like, what's that? And
Mhm.
asking my grandparents, I grew up with my grandparents, and asking them what's that about, and oh, that's a male homosexual, I'm like, and then I'm looking up homosexual, and this is back in the real olden days where you went to the library to scope out things. You didn't go on the internet and Google it. You went to the card catalog and looked up everything you could, and so I was, just delving into all of that, and it still wasn't hitting me per se, like, oh, that's me, but definitely once I got to college and, realized different girls were talking to me than other girls, you know, friends versus girlfriends kind of thing.
God. Yeah. Yeah. And so then that kind of brought the realization to a coming out point. Is that what?
Yeah, I mean, once a femme girl, asked me out and said, and put her hand on mine and said, "This is a date." I went, "Oh, that's a good idea." Like, it just occurred to me, like, oh, this could be a thing instead of the boys thing.
Yeah.
Because I still was in touch with the guys from high school that went to colleges near mine, and
Mhm.
so I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a very progressive grandmother too.
Yeah, I mean, my Irish grandmother, she also was. She said, was very honest. And what did we do wrong? I said, you didn't do anything wrong.
Mm.
And and she was always just asking questions and wanted to know, like, what's life like going to be for you? And she said, that's my greatest fear, is it's going to hurt your career, because I was on a path to either um, go into library sciences or teach. And I was pretty much sure I was going to go into teaching.
Mhm.
And she was worried that, this is before the Briggs Initiative in California, which was to get teachers out of the classrooms, and Anita Bryant.
Mm.
That just sort of galvanized a community of activism for me, anyways. And I kept assuring her it wasn't a problem, because I was teaching adults, so that was lucky.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a second language for years. And, it's kind of funny to be a teacher and have students come out to you that are from other countries where they can't go home. They can't be gay there.
Right.
That
Mm.
was interesting. You don't really think you're being a role model, but there you are.
Right. Mm.
you know.
Yeah. We have to be, there's that old adage of never judge a book by its cover, because we don't know what somebody else is going through, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for years belonged to the Butch Femme community. Different communities in California, we have the luxury of having, the group that's into bowling, or in the group that's into whatever. And this was like the explosion of all the gay bars and gay stuff. So
Yeah.
pre-AIDS. So there's a bowling club and the knitting club and the film club. And so if you were into this, you could find lesbians that were into that as well. And all the identifiers, you could walk through many groups. You could identify as lesbian or dyke or butch or femme, or girly girl or tomboy or lipstick lesbian, you name it, it was there. And
Yeah.
it was a fun time, that's for sure.
It must have been. So that was my next question of what was life like when you finally, because you came out in college and that was still in California.
Yeah, and it was still very closeted because it was a Catholic women's college. And you know the Catholic piece of that, keeping that kind of quiet and thinking, wait a second, this is kind of like a hotbed of lesbianism here.
Uh-huh.
And when I came out to my mother, she was just like, oh my God, how could this happen? And she was just being nasty. And so
Mhm.
I said, well, you're the one that sent me to all girls school. And she was like, that's not why this happened, is it? And I said, not, but it was just kind of a fun thing to throw.
Right, right, right. At that age when you're, yeah, rebuffing your parental guardianship. Um, and how, so your mother, it sounded like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had two grandmothers in your life or just the one grandmother?
Yeah, two grandmothers in my life. I grew up in one of my grandmother's houses with my mom.
Okay.
But I was adopted within my family, so it was really my grandmother that was raising me, because ironically they thought she was too old to adopt me. And so my biological aunt was my mother.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, but basically my grandmother was raising me. So different generation, because of course to her you're going to get married at 18, and if you go to college, don't be too smart, because the boys
Right.
like you. And and I was hearing those messages too, and I'm like, I don't want a boy that doesn't want a smart person.
Exactly. Yeah.
you know
So how so they all, there was some reluctance at first when you were coming out in terms of the reaction of your family, and then how is it now? Are they all
Well, they have all since passed, and my grandmother was just on my team all the time, because I was the poor little child that got adopted. which was very much in my family. I could see I got a great deal from being adopted. I got to private schools being raised as an only child. So, um, but she just was always asking questions and, wanting to know like what gay life was like and whatnot, and sort of breaking down her own prejudices.
Mhm.
Some funny ones. I was like, oh, I didn't know people thought that about gay people, but okay.
Mhm.
And then, of course, she starts telling me about Uncle Bert. Well, Uncle Bert was quite a dandy, in the 1920s. And so, slowly but surely, I'm finding out about all these other gay relatives. And my native grandmother had a brother who was gay,
Mhm.
and he would disappear to different cities for long periods of time. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not the only one.
Right, right. So they already had some experience, but they were trying to just ask questions to have a better understanding.
Great. Right.
Mhm. Wow.
And once I started bringing girlfriends home, my mother was like, "Oh, okay."
Mhm. So would you say it wasn't too difficult for you then?
I mean, in the early beginning, I think you have all this in your head, right? That you put all this stuff on yourself about what's coming out going to be. They're not going to talk to you anymore. They're going to throw you out of the house, and you know, um, and for lots of people that I met in San Francisco, because there's a lot of transplants from all over the country there, that was their story. I mean, I met guys that I worked with had been kicked out of the house at 15 years old in the middle of nowhere, United States in the Midwest, and hitchhiked to California. I mean, so, um, you know, do you need to come out? Do you want to come out? I mean, I think it's a lot easier. People have heard of gay people now. I
Mm,
think it's difficult for kids that are raised in very religious households. Their
right.
parents are, putting a lot more on them. Don't want to see them, don't want them around, and think they're going to hell and all that. I mean, that's hard to overcome.
Absolutely. Mhm.
I do think it's easier for kids now. I mean, in the workforce, I worked in high tech, so I had a lot of younger coworkers. They had gone to school with gay people. They knew gay people. That was part of their social group,
Mm,
was to not segregate like the straight people are getting together for drinks. It was everybody's getting together for drinks, and some of them are gay. And
right.
so I thought that was just the greatest experience for them, because when I was a young person first working, it was very much closeted. We didn't hang out with the straight coworkers. Um,
Okay.
we didn't want them to find out. We didn't want that to affect our jobs in some ways,
I see.
you know.
Mhm. Mhm. I see. So it was still there was still that their wall there
Yeah,
that mhm.
yeah, and there was, the first gay prides were very much activism. People coming after our jobs and trying to get us out of teaching, out of the medical fields and whatnot. And it just galvanized the gay community in a way they probably couldn't have predicted. And of course, AIDS, the activism around AIDS, just brought us out in much bolder way, because the gay men were dying around us, and we thought we were next. So we
Mhm.
were out there at the front of the fields and fighting the battles with them.
Yeah. Yeah. That must have been I mean, if you were gay during that time and lived in either New York or San Francisco, it must I can't even imagine. I mean, it must have a combination of exploration, excitement,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, by then I'd been out about 10
fear.
years, and
Mhm.
if you didn't see somebody for 2 weeks, you knew they were dead.
Mm.
Um, we were caregiving, cobbling together what caregiving is going to look like on a spreadsheet. Who's in
Mm.
charge this week, who's getting the meds, who's picking up so and so's meals. I mean, we just came together in a way I don't know how we did it.
Wow.
because so many people's families just didn't care, didn't want to hear from them,
Right. Right.
and I, you at some point you stopped going to funerals because you were going to two a week. That were your close friends, they were your coworkers, they were so and so's brother, etc. It was I don't know how we did it. We just did. You didn't have a choice. It's like being on a battlefield. You just rolled up your sleeves and helped
Right.
where you were needed, you know.
Do you think that helped propel the queer culture, the gay culture, when that became like Tom Hanks did that movie, and then it kind of became more of a mainstream. People knew about it more, like straight people knew about it more. Do you think that kind of helped propel things at all from your
Um,
point?
I think, parts of the country were very isolated from it.
Mhm,
Um, and that was a city thing. And don't we hate those people anyways?
mhm,
So he put definitely the human face to it of, um, I mean, in that movie, Tom Hanks is had been in this service, and just that whole idea of, the limp-wristed gay guy, that caricature was being blown out of the water. It's like it's everybody and it's anybody, you
right.
know. Um, I knew tradespeople, gay guy tradespeople, and you know, they had to listen to slurs all day long and chime in with these guys to be one of the guys.
Mhm,
And I don't know how they did that kind of stuff, but I do think that movie helped America see itself.
mhm,
You know that.
mhm.
But in terms of galvanizing the queer community, it was pre-AIDS, definitely with people like Anita Bryant coming after our jobs and getting platforms that she had, and the hate speech, and of course Stonewall.
Right.
When drag queens have had enough and take their high heels off, even
What?
gay people know, get out of the way. And San Francisco had its own version of that, where there was a place on Market Street called I want to say Manning's Cafe, and um, transsexual people hung out there, and drag queens, etc., because there was drag queen shows in San Francisco way back in the '60s,
Mhm.
um, and there was cops bothering them. It was one night, and they had just had enough, and it's like they just fought back, and the cops were like, "Oh, now what do we do?" Because everybody's not willingly getting in the paddy wagon,
Oh, wow.
you know.
Wow. And what happened?
It just sort of like stopped the police. The police harassment was kind of like, how do I put it? It's like, oh, we're bored at the end of our shift. Let's go down and bug the drag queens, kind of thing.
Mhm.
That was it. Like, we're tired of this. That's not to say that immediately police harassment of gay people stopped. Um, you know, of course, reading your gay history, which I think is, so I'm also a two spirit, which is what gay Native Americans call themselves. So we have a tradition of passing down to people our oral tradition, including our gay gay one.
Mhm.
And I think straight people don't. I mean, straight people, white people don't do that. So gay history gets kind of like, it's sort of like a rumor. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, I heard about those pink triangles that the Nazis made gay people wear.
Mhm.
The end. That they don't go further than that to find out, like, what was that experience like. So what grew out of that. So what did the 50s look like when gay people had to, if they weren't wearing two articles of clothing that were of their gender, the police could take you in. So of course this affected butches in a way of like, why are you wearing a men's suit? You know,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And what happened through the 60s of the closeted version of your gay self. So many people from the Second World War came home to San Francisco, um, as their base being dropped off, and they didn't go back to their homes in the Midwest. They knew they were gay, and they stayed in this big city.
Right.
That's how this gay culture grew. It's like, hey, we're all here. let's just, let's just make this little village here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how you just recently moved, well, not recently, I guess a number of years ago, from San Francisco or from California to New Mexico to Santa Fe. What was life like there? I imagine it changed. It was very different from the 60s when you
Oh,
left.
oh yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that gay bars are kind of going out of business
Mm,
because younger gays didn't think those were necessary. We can meet each other in other ways, and it's easier.
mhm,
We can talk about this and meet each other in high school, which was not the case for me. You
mm,
went to gay bars too. That was your social place. They were your extended living room.
mhm.
So, like at one time, there were 9 lesbian gay bars in San Francisco, and now there's one left,
Really? Wow.
and it's mixed. Um, you
Mm,
know,
mm,
um, and lesbians are getting priced out of California. Gays are People are getting priced out of California, so that's why I decided to move to Santa Fe. So
mhm.
quite a different vibe here. Uh, it's not to stereotype or categorize anything wrongly, but it's very much let's get together and have a potluck. I hate potlucks because mishmash things don't go together. Like, have a theme. Okay, it's
Right.
Mexican pot. Then I can get behind it. Or it's Chinese potluck. Then I can get behind it. Okay, the food relates. I don't want fabulous French cheese and wine to go with this burger and hot dogs. It doesn't go together with.
Right,
But
right. I love
it,
that
it,
idea.
so, and the house parties are great, but they can also be like not community, because community gets thrown around a lot, and it's like, well, where's the community? Because that means, for me, helping build a community in San Francisco, it means everybody, all ages,
Mhm.
18 to whatever. So we used to throw parties in San Francisco in the Butch Femme community, and we'd have 350 people from 18 years old to 85 years old show up,
Right.
and be all versions of Butch Femme, from girly girls with lipstick and little cocktail dresses and their combat boots on, to
Right.
high femmes with high heels and whatnot, and butches, some in sports jackets and suits and ties, to jeans and t-shirts and that kind of stuff. So it isn't it always about the clothes?
Right.
So to come
Mhm.
here and see that community is very disjointed and not always coming together in one place. And the one place I can see it only is really Pride, because we're all going to this place where there's a party that
Mhm.
that's gay. But sometimes, we need to galvanize and remember that we need to come together, because we're under attack now. This
Right.
current administration doesn't like us. They're
Right.
erasing us, and they're after picking on the trans people. And whether you're, very much a feminist that's a lesbian feminist that's not into including queer or trans people in your community, they are in our community and deserve to be helped, because we're just next door and they're coming after us next. Maybe.
Mm,
I hate to
correct.
sound completely paranoid or conspiracy theorist, but hey, this happened before. We've seen it happen.
We've seen it happen, right, not that long ago.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. And now you have started a thing, um, you've been organizing a Guerrilla Gay Bar. Do you want to talk about that for a moment? I'd
Yes,
love the
so
idea.
Gorilla Queer Bar started in 2000 when, so it went nationwide and then it went worldwide. So I was just recently reading up on this. So some people in San Francisco got together and said, we don't always have to go to queer bars. And some of the queer bars were already disappearing. So we're just going to take over. So that's where the word gorilla comes from. Take
Mhm.
over the bar on a Friday night or whatever. So once a month, they would just pick a new bar and show up and, started with, advertising in newspapers under events and Facebook and, whatever people are using, Instagram, TikTok, saying, hey, this is where we're meeting. So
Mhm.
from a small group of like 50 people, it grew to a couple hundred showing up. So I was talking to my wife here, and she said, well, why don't we do that here in Santa Fe? I'm like, hey, good idea. Because having queer nights at different places that do promote their queer night, it's always something funky with a funny night, like Monday. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, for me, that's fine. I'm retired, but people, it's a school night for lots of people that would go to school or work. So it's the third Thursday, and our next one is March 20th at the Social Kitchen at the Sage Motel.
Mhm.
Um, and in April, we will be at Joe's Tequila Bar.
Oh, love
And
that.
so we're picking them based on the people that are there. And I say, where do you want to go? Because I am still relatively new to Santa Fe. So I want to go places everybody likes to go.
Mhm.
I find that including a bar that has food or food nearby works better because otherwise people just leave. Um,
Right.
and it's 4 to 8 p.m. And we also try to pick places that have good parking.
Right. In Santa Fe, that can be a challenge.
Yeah. And so sometimes people are like, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you go here? And why didn't you do this? And it's like, that's why it's called Gorilla. We're just doing that. The other thing we do, and I inherited this group, there was this group of women that met for queer coffee on
Mhm.
Wednesdays, 9:30 to 11 at O'Hori's, 505 Cerritos. So there's two O'Hori's, so the big one. And, I started hanging out with them. And, this is kind of like we still had a little bit of social distancing. It's just a bunch of queers, gay boys, lesbians, however you identify. And so
Mhm.
these women then had to go back to graduate school. They were doing graduate school online and then they had to go back in the classroom. So the woman approached me and she says, well, you used to organize in California. Can you and your friend T keep this up? And I said, sure. And she said, I have one request, keep it queer. And I said, what do you mean keep it queer? And she says, some of my friends my age don't identify as lesbian or gay men. They identify as queer. And
Right.
I have trans friends that come to this group, and I hope that's cool and whatnot. And we said, oh, absolutely, because our organizing in California always included everybody. I didn't realize that it was so separate here in Santa Fe. And she says, it can be. So would you keep it queer? Call it queer. Sure. So
Mhm.
it's now 4 years going strong. So every Wednesday, we also meet the first Saturday, and we start at 10 because the people that work said, we don't want to get up at 9:30. 9:30. And then we often go to brunch afterwards.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
know other groups that do queer coffee, like Lesgo, New Mexico, for example, does a queer coffee, and I don't know when. It's iconic. But
Mhm.
so we started again with a small group of people that were consistently coming. And, we can be anywhere between 5 and 6 people to up to 20 people. So we meet inside Chomp, which is next door to O'Hori's. And then when the weather's nice, we're in that nice little patio they have there.
Right. Beautiful.
And, it's more inclusive in terms of, you can be underage and come, you can bring your dog, you can bring your kid, we're not
Right.
talking about anything super salacious that
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
certain times, But
Well, thank you for doing that, Rope. Thank you for organizing both the coffee and the Gorilla Gay Bar. I think that's awesome. We can
yeah.
never have, I know that bars are going, right? Queer bars are going out of fashion, but yet we still want to get together. And it's important to retain that sense of community, to your point that you made,
Mhm.
particularly, yeah.
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 Help out the youngins.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I look forward to sharing your information.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And thanks everybody for listening. And if you are out there someplace around the world where you do not feel like you have a safe space or someone to connect with and you're concerned, please reach out to us through our website, lipservice.media, and we will do our best to connect you with someone that can offer you support. So thanks again so much for listening to this podcast.